Hey everyone, welcome to episode 24 of The Followers. This week we're bringing you an episode on myths, and we're going to debunk some common myths in around some training practices and dietary practices that we've come across quite frequently in our own lines of work. So Murph, you're going to give us a bit of an overview of today's chat.
Yeah, so today we're dividing up. We look to try and divide it evenly between exercise-based stuff and nutrition-based stuff, but we found the majority of myths, whether they be, and thanks to everyone on Instagram and Twitter who followed us. We set up the account there in the last week, had a good few suggestions on Instagram on stuff you would like us to chat about today, the various myths, and just people we were chatting to in general. So the majority of those are nutrition-based, but we will touch on a few exercise-based as well. The main format today is we're going to take two each and dig into them in a bit of detail. They're kind of the most common ones, and they just have a little bit more nuance around them. And then we'll do a rapid fire of various other ones that came in or we were requested to touch on. First one, Shane is going to take us through, and this comes, he said, from an awful lot of clients he's worked with, and you'd see a lot about it, particularly now in January, with so many kind of health experts coming on daytime and morning talk shows and spouting a lot of stuff that you're like, I don't know, is that really true? So Shane's going to start us off there chatting about artificial sweeteners.
Yeah, so basically, I'm sure you've all heard of them before. You've all heard the conversation that are artificial sweeteners worse than sugar in some cases. So I suppose I want to start this off by saying that sugar itself isn't necessarily bad in and of itself. It's just obviously it's going to be a lot higher in calories than an artificial sweetener, which is in most cases 0 to 1 or 2 calories. So the main reason you're going to go for something that is using artificial sweeteners over sugar is if you are watching your calorie intake. Whereas, for example, if you're an athlete, before you go out and on the pitch, you don't want to take something that's got an artificial sweetener over sugar, because that extra sugar is going to give you energy. So that's when you can utilize sugar well. Whereas artificial sweeteners is again a way of cutting down those calories. So for the most part, first off, artificial sweeteners are 100% safe. So they're all approved by food federations. They're all FDA approved. There have been studies in the past that have linked artificial sweeteners with things like cancers, but for the most part, they've either been disproved completely or they're only valid in large quantities. So in 400-500 times what you regularly would take into artificial sweeteners. So for most part, whenever I'm talking to clients, artificial sweeteners are completely okay in moderation. So if you're having 2 or 3 bottles of Diet Coke maybe a day, or you're having 2 or 3 artificial sweeteners with your coffee, it's not a problem at all. And again, usually it's just a way of substituting that sweet craving. So if anybody has sugar cravings or they're finding it hard to cut out sweets completely, artificial sweeteners can be a great way of giving you that sweet craving without actually compromising your calorific goals. So I don't know if you guys agree with that or how you would see it.
Yeah, an awful lot of studies that were done that showed that it leads to toxic levels were done in rats or rodents, some mice. And they'd have because an awful lot of the artificial sweeteners are 200 to 500 times stronger tasting than sugar, the amount that goes into them is so minuscule that for them to reach toxic levels in your body, like you said, if you were to drink enough Coke Zero, for it to reach a level of toxicity in your body, you'd have drowned first. You'd have consumed so much, it would have just flushed everything out of your system. And that's what would have become
Yeah, that's for the most part. If you consume the amount of artificial sweeteners that they did, the test with negative effects on people worth of sugar, the ramifications would be much worse if you had that amount of sugar, if that makes sense. So obviously, if you deal with a toxic level of any macronutrient ingredient, you're going to be kind of going into dangerous territory. But when you're just, again, as John said, it's much stronger than sugar, which means the dosages are even smaller than sugar would be in these drinks. So you're dealing with a very, very, very small dose of these artificial sweeteners, which are going to have absolutely no toxic effect. So I assume it's something that the sugar industry, not to be really going down that rabbit hole, but I'm assuming it was something that was pushed by the sugar industry to stop artificial sweeteners taking over the game.
we also have to be mindful that artificial sweeteners is a broad category. They are quite different to each other. Just to say that aspartame and I don't know, say sucralose, they both have similar impacts. They're completely different, chemical structures and all. So their impacts on the body, their taste. If you got properly into them, you would notice significant differences in taste there and everything as well. So what some people say is it can impact, say, the biome of the gut. Now, where I have, and a lot of people actually notice this, is some of the sweeteners you will find particularly the alcohol style sugar replacers that are used in some protein bars, and particularly the kind of halo top ice creams, they can lead to a lot of stomach discomfort in some people. Now, it has quite a different impact than what sugar will have on you in terms of in the body, but completely different outcomes. Now, like I said, I have heard quite a few people saying that they've had negative effects that way.
It can be, from a gut health or kind of gut digestion point of view, a lot of people find that with the combination of an artificial sugar and, say, something that's highly carbonated, like one of those Monster energy drinks, that can also affect the gut a lot, just because it's not that it's something so artificial, but it's something that not necessarily you're used to from your normal diet. So it's almost like acts as a shock to the system, so your gut's just not able to process that.
Artificial sweeteners as well are often lumped in with other things, such as in the energy drinks there. They come along with caffeine. So say in the likes of younger people, caffeine. Not just caffeine, very high caffeine, but particularly in younger people, then it's not a good health behavior to be reliant on those because your sleep is lagging, you're not eating enough, you're eating too much sugar from other sources, and then you're relying on those. That it's often aligned with other poor health behaviors and leads to poor health outcomes just because of the grouping of things as opposed to just the artificial sweeteners.
Yeah, I think one thing just to lastly touch on that that I've come across or had mentioned to me is like that artificial sweeteners like aspartame can cause metabolic issues, or but it's the other way around. It's if you've got like rare metabolic syndrome like PKU, there's an ingredient in aspartame that can be quite dangerous for you, that's worth avoiding. But that's such a rare condition, and then often what I'll see is that it's just like, oh, this is there in this very unique group of people, so therefore it's the case for everyone, and that's just simply not true.
Yeah, because you can make that case for so many foods and nutrients in general. Like people with nut allergies, nuts are bad. No, they're bad for people with nut allergies. Dairy's bad. No, it's bad for people who are lactose intolerant. It's similar that way. Yeah, that's grand. Next one we look at then to tie in an exercise one is, and actually a few people have contacted me about this, is the knees crossing the toes when squatting. It's something I'd actually be fairly passionate about as well. I get into a lot of discussions on it. So I've looked into this a good few times in the past, and I've no idea where it came from. Like that there's this imaginary line that comes from your big toe, and when your knees go across that, you're going to need knee replacement in possibly 2. You might only get 2 years. You might only get 18 months out of it for the time you need that. And you hear so many people when getting people Scott, okay, we're standing on the middle of our foot on our heels, and make sure your knees don't go past your toes. And there's so when you actually look at the biomechanics of it, there's so little to support it. And that first of all, everyone's femur lengths are completely different. Everyone's feet are completely different. So for this imaginary line then to be deciding whether your knees can go to a certain distance forwards or backwards without looking at the overall hip structure, femur length, the length of your spine, whether it's a front squat, a back squat, a goblet squat, anything like that, it's just like you're missing the forest for the trees there. Why some people say it's an issue is because it places too much stress on the knees. Now, my main point there is that if you're concerned about putting stress on your knees, why are you doing squats in the first place? Also, if you want to make your legs, particularly your quad, stronger, you have to apply a stress to the muscles around the knees, because that's how getting stronger, getting fitter, becoming more resilient in general works. You apply a stress, you supercompensate over time, you get stronger because of that stress and specific to that stress, and that allows you to apply a stronger or more potent stressor in the subsequent days, weeks, months, all like that. That's how strength, getting better at squatting, all like that works. So to allow that stress on the knees, then you have to allow them go forward. The other way of looking at then is, by allowing your knees to go forward, it allows your spine to stay more upright. If I was to load somewhere or apply stress somewhere, I'm fairly okay with applying a stress on my knees. That one stress in my squat technique is okay, and I'm not massively overloading in terms of the amount of reps I'm doing or the weight I'm lifting. I can cope with that, I'll adapt to that. But if I'm, say, my upper body or my torso is quite forward lean, and understand I'm doing stuff with my hands now, and majority of people listen to this via audio, if I'm too far forward and I have a weight on my back and I start to come up, my spine now is doing an awful lot of lifting in a position that's not supported to work in. If we're concerned about our knees bending too much, why would we have been given a hinge joint at the knee in the first place? The key is not so much in not bending your knees, but being careful in applying the amount of squats we do and the weight we put on that squat. I don't just go in the very first day, I've never been to the gym before, and do 10 sets of 10 with 100 kg my back. That's going to lead to an awful lot of knee pain, as it would if I did 10 sets of 10 at reasonably heavy weight at any exercise, and that's going to be bad for that joint. But progressively building up over time with good technique, whether it be squats, bench press, anything, that's the key. But just this one single rule that your knees can't cross your toes, whereas realistically, for the majority of people's body positions, they have to cross.
I know, just I agree with everything you said, but I was talking to a few older coaches actually just before Christmas, and they said that an awful lot of the time when they would have used that particular cue, it was specifically with people who their main issue was when they squatted to the bottom, their heels were coming up off the ground. So they saw that as a logical, obviously it doesn't explain why it took off and now everybody thinks that's how they should squat. But it was a cue that's very specific to someone's individual problem. So again, we're not saying that that shouldn't be the case for some people. Like if someone does have an issue that their heel is coming off, or they need to bring if their heels are coming up and they do need to watch going that far forward, it is a good way to visualize it if that is your issue. But again, I completely agree. It doesn't apply to everybody. It's a very small percentage that it would apply to.
And even when we were chatting to Stephen there a couple of weeks ago, and I would do the same. Majority of people, I'd prop up the heels with either a weight or wear weightlifting shoes anyway to give it more room, so that when your knees do come forward, it prevents the heels lifting off the floor, because they're starting in a higher position anyway. It's when knees come off the floor, it's not so much stress on the knees. It's just that you have a much smaller base of support then when you are pushing the weight back up.
And I think you have to be very careful with that language of, knees not passing your toes. A lot of the time that's a comment that's passed to people who are just beginning or very early in their training. And that's something that will stick with them. Things you're taught very early on are very hard to shake, no matter what your age. So if it's something if it's a cue that you're using this day and age, you have to kind of think about, right, what's the best cue to get the safest movement here in this person, but also, is this cue actually something that isn't going to put them at risk? Am I actually giving them a fair bit of knowledge here to understand what it is they're doing and what they should be feeling and what they're actually trying to elicit from this movement? So in the case of a squat there, like just that blanket statement of your knees shouldn't pass your toes, like to what end is there positive there in that? And it's just something that I think if there is anyone listening, there is any coach or anyone who's beginning coaching or anyone who's beginning training with a coach or anything like that, and this is being said, just to kind of be a little bit wary in around what's being said to you and what cues you're giving out as well, because it is something that you're going to the people who are most risk of a comment like that are people just beginning and learning as they're getting going.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. Like, we as coaches obviously have many different cues, but we have no control over which ones people actively remember. Like, you could tell someone the same cue every day for 6 months and they'll remember the one throwaway comment you made 6 months ago, where you're saying that. So every cue does have to be important and you can't keep chopping and changing. So when you're cueing, you should stick to the absolute fundamentals, or make it very clear that we're doing this temporarily to solve this issue.
Yeah, because I used to be, like, I don't know, when I was in college, the first lecturer we had on health-related activities, I won't say his name now, he would be well known in a lot of circles around Ireland. We said, like, oh no, knees can't cross toes there when you're squatting. And I was stuck to that till I went on and did my S&C start after college. And I can remember looking at videos of Olympic weightlifters and all, like, how come they're all breaking that rule? Like, what? Like, they're definitely all going to have operations soon. And then, like, I just learned a bit more about it, and I was like, oh, that's a stupid thing.
I'm going to need the operations.
Yeah. With my stupidly weak quads. Damien, you're going to look at eating fat, making you fat.
Yes, so next topic. So this is it's a bit topical for this time of year. I tend to come across it a bit more, but it does tend to be sticking around like a bad smell even this day and age. So basically, the perception out there is that when governments are moving for fat-free and lower-fat foods, that obviously meant that fat was the problem, and that fat was making was the sole reason for gaining weight and gaining adipose tissue, which is our body fat mass. So on a very simple basis, fat is one of our macronutrients, and there are 9 calories in 1 gram of fat. So just to start off that, but to gain adipose tissue or to gain weight in any aspect, even to build muscle and all that, we do need to be in a calorie surplus. Now, you can still be eating a high fat diet but be in a calorie deficit, so lose weight. You can be in a calorie surplus, eating a high fat diet and gain weight. You can be in a calorie surplus and eating a very low fat diet and still gain weight. So what I'm trying to get across here is that eating fat does not inherently lead to you gaining weight. It is worth noting that that while with 1 gram of fat we do have 9 calories, as I said, in 1 gram of carbohydrate we have 4 calories, and in 1 gram of protein we have another 4 calories there. So there are 3 macronutrients. So the calorie density of 1 gram of fat is more than double that of our other 2 macronutrients, but our calorie balance and our energy intake versus our output is still the balancing act that we should try and work on if we're looking to manage weight and energy levels. So when it comes to gaining fat, we need to be in a calorie surplus. And if we're looking to lose weight, we need to be in a calorie deficit, and then just to stay where you are, naturally enough you want to be at your calorie maintenance levels. So basically you could be eating majority of your calories through protein. It'd be very tough, but you could be eating majority of your calories through protein. If you're in a surplus, you will gain weight, and that could, if you're in an excess surplus there and you're not training adequately, you will gain body fat. Your body will just store the excess energy that's coming in. The same for carbohydrate, the same for fat, and often it is the case that it's not just one macronutrient, it's just a mixture of the 3 that's coming together, that you just have too many calories going in altogether, and that this causes you to gain weight. So that's just a very simple thing. So eating fat is not inherently going to make you fat at all. It still comes down to your overall consumption of calories across the board.
A lot of that fear mongering came around a few studies that were done in the 60s and 70s, and just like epidemiological association based research. So they looked at people who were overweight, and they realized those who were overweight tended to eat diets reasonably high in fat. And this is around the same time that more and more fast foods were coming in America. So fast foods in general, it's not the fat that's in them, it's the high amounts of processing that lead to you wanting to consume more, that led to them gaining extra weight. And like, this is just association based. So it didn't look at what their portion sizes were like. It didn't look at the overall foods or food types they were eating. They were just eating larger amounts of fat. So that's what was leading to be fat. Then I suppose healthy eating recommendations from that came, we need to start eating diets much lower in fat. And from there came all of the low fat foods or the fat free foods or whatever like that. And it neglected like a lot of the things that and we did a full episode on fat back around, I'm going to say around episode 9, but I'm not sure, to find out like the reasons we do eat it, and it is so vital in our diets. But that's why they started making those recommendations. It would have been far more beneficial to start looking at the sources of where fat was coming from, the different types of fat people are eating, but particularly educating them on the portion sizes. Because you said, Damien, it has more than double the amount of calories that a gram of protein or carbohydrate has. So understanding how we have smaller portions and how we can still build that into an overall healthy diet would have been far more beneficial than just the blanket statement of we need to eat diets lower in fat.
Mm-hmm. I think the Mediterranean diet, even as an example there, kind of flies in the face of it. It's, renowned as this healthier approach to a diet. Now, it's not, obviously not everyone is in a position to eat in that way, but it is a diet that's quite healthy or quite good in or quite healthy in its levels of fat intake. And so like just this removal of fat, it doesn't actually answer a lot of things. And I know that often we look at the things like the Mediterranean diet from a heart health perspective, but it's still like on a calorie basis. We're looking to try and manage our calories across the board.
Yeah, I was just going to come in and say that what John's saying about fat is the exact same thing that happened to sugar kind of, I suppose, 10 years down the line, where it's just highly palatable foods. are being demonized because of the sugar rather than the fact that they're so high in calories and so highly palatable.
And a lot of those hyper palatable foods bring a very low degree of satiation with them too, so we can just keep on eating them. And that's often the case with ultra processed foods too, is that like the more processing that is taking place to get that food to your hand to eat it, the easier it is for your body to break it down.
Also, in most cases, like with the foods John said that would have been investigated in that study in the 70s for kind of fast food, they'd be the same foods then that are coming in that sugar study. Like if you look at a Big Mac, you'd be like, oh, that's such a high fat food, but it's also very high in sugar. The same with those things. So it's the exact same foods that are causing the issue rather than that specific macronutrient or sugar breakdown. So it's important to look at the whole picture rather than just picking one thing to zero in on. And I think food marketing companies make that much worse because they will automatically bill something as low in sugar. And if you see in big letters low in sugar, you just assume, all right, well, sugar must be bad if they're proudly protesting that they don't have any sugar in their products. I'm having a big dig at Big Sugar today, haven't I?
Shane is sponsored by Big Artificial Sweeteners.
Yeah. Yes.
Shane, you're going to take a look at some
Shane.
some common supplements that are pushed out around this time, mainly the Fit Teas and the BCAAs.
Making more enemies here in the big industries. Right, cool. So we're going to touch. First off, we're going to have a look at BCAAs. So BCAAs would be one of the most popular supplements kind of in the industry now. It would be up there with kind of creatine, protein, and BCAAs would be the top three you'd kind of hear about regularly, kind of, I suppose, mainly bodybuilding circles. But BCAA stands for branched chain amino acids, and it consists of 3 different amino acids. So it's leucine, isoleucine, and valine. And there's 3 amino acids. There are 3 essential amino acids. So essential amino acids means that our body cannot produce them by itself. They have to be gotten through our diet. Which, again, when you hear that on its own, it sounds like, okay, BCAAs are something I probably should be getting into me. But what you're kind of not told, I suppose, is the BCAAs would be 3 of the most prominent amino acids in the foods we eat. So again, most meats, chicken, poultry, fish, eggs, dairy, they're all going to be fairly high in those 3 amino acids. And even if you look at a vegan or vegetarian route, lentils, legumes, peas, they're all going to be fairly high in those 3 amino acids as well. So while they are important amino acids for the body, like they do serve a very important purpose, they're very important in specifically muscle building, I suppose, especially for leucine, but they're not something that we essentially need to supplement with, because we should be if we are on top of our overall protein intake. So if you're getting enough protein in during the day, there's no reason you should be deficient in any of these 3 amino acids specifically. So if you look at it, obviously there's probably a lot. They're probably the 3 that you have to worry about at least. So even if your protein intake isn't what it should be, leucine, isoleucine, and valine are probably the 3 that you're getting enough of. So BCAAs are, while they are important, there's no need for you to supplement them. So if you are in a position where you are deficient in any of those 3 amino acids, it's your overall protein intake that is what you should be addressing rather than BCAAs specifically. So they're essentially, if you want to get a supplement to supplement them, there's no reason you shouldn't get an overall protein shake. So at least that is impacting you positively. So it's affecting your protein intake, so it's upping your overall protein number, whereas rather BCAA isn't really. It's just getting those 3 amino acids, and you're just putting a band-aid pretty much on the actual problem that you're facing. So yeah, essentially those 3 amino acids specifically, and all amino acids really, you can address with your diet. So if you are getting a sufficient amount of good quality protein into your diet, so again, we covered this in our protein episode, which is back towards our early days. If you want to check out the backlog, but there should be no issue with any amino acid being deficient. But again, those 3 specifically are very prominent in our diet.
Just in terms of the marketing and the companies, supplement companies, like Damien, you who formerly worked for Big Supplement, why is there the push on BCAAs? Like, are they relatively cheap to produce, and there's a decent markup on them, or are they a byproduct of making something else?
It's exactly the former point that you made there. They are very cheap to go about creating, and the markup on them is huge. So like back when I had sold my soul down the river there, but it was very much a conversation that was commonly had where we need to try and move BCAAs a lot more, because we'll make a lot more money off of that than we will off, say, our whey or creatine or any of the other big supplement areas, because the markup was absolutely huge. And I suppose I no longer work in the industry because integrity, but like there are things that I'd run into issues with, and I'm like, hang on a second, like why would I convince this person, and like obviously wrong, I was just in the wrong industry, but like trying to meet sales and then just going, hang on, I can't sell this to this person because they don't need it. And but yeah, it's very much down to the fact that they're produced so cheaply and the markup is enormous, and that's why there's so much effort put into marketing with them, because the bang for your buck there on the supplement industry side is huge, like the turnover. So that's it's a big thing. It's a great example of where marketing is the convincing point. And like Shane mentioned, there's the information you're given stops well short of the point of where it's like you actually get all these from your diet, but the information is given to you is, oh, leucine, you need this for muscle building, you need this for muscle protein synthesis, and then it's just, oh man, well I obviously need these, and that's where it comes down to. It's a complete marketing angle to the industry, and yeah,
I think the industry as a whole is so under-regulated as well. So like if you buy a BCAA product, that could be like 10% your actual BCAAs and then 90% sugar, sawdust and fairy dust. Like there's nothing to regulate. There's no specific amount that it has to be in a BCAA product to make it a BCAA. Like it's just so much, the whole industry is built around that marketing power.
Also, if you look at how the majority of people who make money out of fitness industries there, like particularly the influencer side of things, like it is relatively difficult, other than selling like online plans or doing photo shoots, which are like, like the online plans, you either have one that you sell to everyone, and realistically people are going to be like, why am I getting the exact same as someone else? You do have to try and, like, it's setting up with affiliate links and getting discount codes and all like that. So the more items they can get behind and try and promote through their topless photos or booty blast workouts or whatever like that, like BCAs are a nice one to tie in with and get behind in terms of making a bit of profit that way. So like there's a certain amount of capitalism driving it all for the influence.
Moving on, so other supplements in the industry, I suppose the next one would be fat burners, which again, even in the name, it's not number one ingredient in most fat burners is going to be A, caffeine, and then B, some sort of a diuretic element. So be it dandelion root, something along those lines that's just going to make you excrete water, and then the caffeine will raise your heart rate, which will increase your TDE, so your daily energy expenditure will increase slightly, like ever so slightly. So again, in theory, it will or should, if nothing else changes and you start taking a fat burner, slightly increase your energy expenditure, so slightly increase your weight loss. But again, it won't specifically attack fat. Like there's so many that'll say focus on that last stubborn 2 kilos, that last bit of belly fat. It's nothing magic or nothing outside of what you do already. So usually it's something, again, in the industry, I suppose it is somewhat helpful because it would be something that people would take in the build up to a show when they need a diuretic product and they need to, again, essentially dry themselves out, dehydrate themselves. That's when it can come in handy. But for general population, there's absolutely no need to be taking any sort of a fat burner product. There's no real legitimate reasoning behind it.
Unless diuretic isn't really, it's not taking out fat from the body, it's just draining water so you become lighter in general, really.
Exactly, yeah. So it's just, again, it will make a difference to your weight, but once you drink water, that's coming back. So again, in a very specific population, that's handy because you're specifically going shopping for a diuretic. But this diuretic is going to be called Rip Freak or Super Lean or something like that. And that's when like your average 18, 19-year-old walks into a supplement shop and they see a big sign that says Ripped Super Lean Freak. They're like, cool, I'd like to be a Ripped Super Lean.
I'll take one. Weekend puns are ready.
Yeah, and it's an example of, again, we spoke about it a few episodes back on the kind of the physique or bodybuilding type sport and its influence on the health and fitness industry, really. And there's a product that's very specific to a specific point of a program there for athletes like that they will just get maybe that extra 0.5% that they're looking for. But your day-to-day individual, it's a complete waste of money, time, and it's a little bit dangerous if you are dehydrating yourself like that regularly.
Right, next then we're going to look at some the reports that an all natural diet is going to be the key to helping you lose weight. So I can see some kind of semblance of sense behind that, in that by reducing the amount of processed foods you eat, because it's not necessarily the processes that go through, or it's not the specific ingredients in processed foods that cause you to gain weight. It's more so the fact that the specific combinations of stuff that you just really like to eat, and how they are able to, I suppose, cross balance salt, fat, and sugar with each other to constantly want you to eat more and more and more, that leads you to overeat. But to say that if I just ate fruit, if I just ate rice, spuds, and like grilled meat, that caused me to lose weight because they're healthier foods and healthier nutrients, like realistically it would. But it's just the fact that it's so much more difficult to overeat on natural foods, as opposed to what happens in the steps of processing something that leads to it causing you to gain extra weight. Like, if any ever watched the episode of, I love watching the old episodes of it, is Man versus Food. There's one of them where he's trying to eat a huge amount of ice cream, and he gets caught on it. So he keeps eating the ice cream until he just stops. And he's like, oh, what do I do to try and get myself to eat the rest of this ice cream before the time that it was up? So he orders fries, chips, extra salted, extra crispy ones. He starts eating a few of those, and once he's eaten a few of them, because they've changed the satiety levels in him, and because you go from eating one savoury thing, you then want something sweet, he's then able to polish off the rest of the ice cream and get it all into him. The way those foods are blended together, and like we discussed the likes of like fast food places and McDonald's and all like that earlier, after you eat the Big Mac, which is, savoury there, then you have the crispy salted fries. What else would you want other than that lovely McFlurry? Because the way the textures in your mouth and the taste and the different underlying things in there complement each other so well, that's what's leading you to want to overeat the whole time.
Yeah, no, that's very much covered it, and there's that mix it with something I mentioned a few minutes back as well, just that the more processed the food is by the time you get to it, the less your body has to work to break it down. So like there's, you can end up wanting that little bit more. So when you're looking at, say, an all natural diet, say like you take, a chicken breast, that the satiation that you can get from that, in comparison to, and I suppose the satiation you get from it, but also how long the satiation lasts, it can be, you can get through quite a little bit more when you're going down the kind of maybe more processed burger route or processed foods route, or maybe it could be, protein bars, whatever it might be. It could be chocolate, whatever route you're going down. That, if you look at your foods that are kind of deemed to be kind of your natural foods, I'm not really sure what that means, but your natural foods, that it's just a lot of it comes down to your body's ability then to break it down. And the more something is processed before you get it, the easier it is for your body to kind of work through it and break it down and leave you feeling, hungry a little bit sooner as well, to consume a little bit more.
Just so everyone is clear there, satiated means it's a combination between feeling satisfied and feeling full from your food. So the more natural foods will often tend to leave you feeling that bit fuller or more satisfied than whereas a lot of processed foods are specifically designed to not leave you satiated, so you constantly want more and more and more and tend to overconsume. While it can be important to concentrate on not totally eliminating the processed foods, ties into the artificial sweeteners earlier. Like if you were to swap out a can of Coke for a can of Coke Zero a couple of times in the week, like that's going to lead to an overall reduction in calories. While both are quite processed, the Coke Zero is going to leave you feeling that little bit more satisfied. It's going to help you like meet those sugar cravings or sweetness cravings that you have, but still not massively tip you over in terms of calories overall. That's why it doesn't need to be solely focused on natural foods. Plus, like so many yogurts, like yogurt is not natural. It has to, like, you don't take yogurt straight from the cow, like. But some of those are like, some of the yogurts you get, I know the little black ones I get, and they're about the same amount of protein as a protein shake, and they're like really tasty as well. So not specifically natural, but still a really useful part of an overall diet if you are trying to manage calories, reduce weight, whatever like that.
Yeah, and it actually on that kind of point as well, just that often something you will see in this area that's kind of banded around is like, oh, that you should avoid, processed foods, but like pretty much all food is processed to some degree by the time it gets to you, by the time it gets to your shop. Cooking is a form of processing. It's just a very broad term that's used to kind of package a lot of things together there, without a whole pile of depth in the information. So yeah, it's I suppose just to round that off, really, Murph, just like an all natural diet. Just kind of the idea, what you're trying to get to is still very much just having a good quality diet, aiming to get in a good variety of foods, that are going to leave you feeling full, that you're going to enjoy eating, and that'll help you to kind of stay on track with whatever your own individual health and fitness kind of goals are.
Next thing, you're going to look at eggs and cholesterol and how that kind of is often thought of as bad in the body.
Yeah, so look, it's a big enough area, and I'm not going to go into massive detail on it. We've covered quite a bit in good detail, but something that we do see around is that, look, eggs contain cholesterol. Cholesterol is bad for our heart health, and so therefore you shouldn't eat eggs. No, that's a very wide statement that isn't necessarily based in a whole pile of truth. Now, when you go back through the research that would have looked into this, that was the association that was made, but as this has been looked into a little bit more, your dietary cholesterol doesn't have as big or much at all of an impact on your blood cholesterol levels by itself. So just eating foods that contain cholesterol doesn't mean that your blood cholesterol is going to skyrocket. There are things that matter most from a blood cholesterol level. Obviously, your genetics is huge. So some people are genetically going to have a higher blood cholesterol level, and this is something they need to be quite aware of and quite careful with. But things like your lifestyle, the overall quality of your diet. Do you exercise? Do you smoke? Do you drink? Are you quite sedentary in nature, or do you move quite a lot? So having a good active lifestyle with a good quality diet is going to benefit your blood cholesterol levels outside of genetics. However, eating eggs for the simple reason that they or removing eggs from your diet for the simple reason that they contain cholesterol isn't really going to have any effect whatsoever on your blood cholesterol levels. And things like eggs could almost be considered a superfood in if we were going to use that terrible term, but like there's some fantastic fat sources there. There's eggs are filled with vitamins and minerals that other foods just don't really have in the same abundance that eggs do, and they're a great high quality protein source as well. So there's so many benefits to eggs, and including eggs in our diet and our routines each day. But just to avoid eggs because they contain cholesterol is really missing the overall picture of what the issue that cholesterol actually poses to us.
I think it's Rebecca Nolan, Teacher Triceps, often says that they could almost classify eggs as a vegetable. They contain so many other micronutrients.
She does actually, yeah. That's a great point. Yeah, you could. So yeah, I don't want to get too down that line because you can get there's a lot more avenues that we could open up there, but that's the general kind of overview.
I think that's kind of an issue that has to be addressed even more on the medical side of things, because I feel, especially in kind of the older school doctors and GP, I still think if someone comes in and has high cholesterol, the first protocol will be, okay, we have to change your diet and get rid of eggs and all other fat, and almost nearly bring them to like a 0 to very low fat diet in order to change it, when that's just like, we have the research now to say that that's just not the case. So it probably needs a bigger media outlet than this podcast, but I think it is something we have to have a larger conversation with and change.
I suppose that's one of the issues, isn't it, with the medical degree, in that like nutrition isn't covered. I think there's like a kind of a token covering of it, but in the detail that would need to be known, it's not covered. So like you have doctors kind of look at it going like, well, there's cholesterol here, you have high cholesterol, we'll like 2 and 2 and getting 5. But yeah, it's understandable.
Yeah, to be fair, like the whole biomedical model is designed around treating illness and symptoms of illness as opposed to the prevention, like, and all like that too. We're going to touch quickly now on a few others that came in. We'll briefly go through all these, kind of a quick fire round. So the first one here is eating 6 or more small meals a day will lead to a faster metabolism.
So yeah, there's quite a bit of research on this, and I think actually another podcast, Sigma Nutrition by Danny Lennon, covered this quite recently also, in that we're very clear that eating, you can eat 1 meal in the day, or you can eat 6 or 8 meals in the day. Your metabolic rate is going to be your metabolic rate. Your metabolism is going to work at the rate it's going to work at, and the frequency of meals that you eat across the day is not going to affect that. That's not where it's just completely false.
Yeah, it's slightly on the behavioural aspect. Like if you say, okay, I'm going to do all my eating in 1 meal, like some people say, we'll get up at 8 o'clock tomorrow, we'll have a big dinner and get it out of the way for the day, and just hoping like that meal is going to keep going. Like as you get hunger or have less available energy there, like to digest from, you're probably going to be a little less active later that evening. You're going to burn less calories just because you're less active because of that, and you may even feel a bit stodgy directly after that large meal as well, so therefore burn slightly less calories. But it's not a metabolism thing, it's a behavioural thing there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Next thing quickly, we're looking at rock salt is better for you than traditional table salt. So we'll often
usually
see like
curious about this,
the whole the Himalayan pink salt, and how that's so much better for you than all other types.
Yeah. There's some athletes out there who they will swear that their performance, their recovery, whatever it might be, has improved exponentially since they've started including things like their pink Himalayan rock salt and over your table salt or over anything. But it's just simply not true, and they both have similar effects on our body. If you're looking to try to prevent cramp, if you compete in triathlons or quite long distance events, or you're in a field sport and you cover particularly high distances, that maybe having an extra bit of salt added to your meals in the lead up to your game might be positive, or supplementing with a salt supplement might be beneficial there to prevent or offset, I should say offset cramp, but it's in general we should be trying to reduce our salt intake.
There are other aspects of electrolytes there, such as potassium and that can be impacting your cramp. Plus, you have to look at your overall conditioning program. Are the muscles in your body conditioned for what you're trying to prepare them to go through, as opposed to just saying, I train for 20 minutes a day and I'm going to train run a marathon. It's not the salt that's causing you to cramp.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's also the on the other side of things. So if you're not an athlete, we are the public health recommendations are to try and reduce salt intake and to try and lower your risk of hypertension, high blood pressure from things like high salt intake across the diet. And if you look at the foods that you do have on a day-to-day basis, you'll find that there's quite a sufficient level of salt there naturally anyway.
For something like when you said there is some athletes who will swear by taking this specific type of salt, there's cases like that where this might be a conversation there for a completely different date, but there's cases like that where I would be inclined to say nothing, because they're still getting their salt in, and there's a huge psychological benefit to a player who thinks they're taking some sort of magic pill, as opposed to a player who's just like, all right, it's just a run-of-the-mill game day. But again, so usually in cases like that, there's some battles that you should fight because it will make a huge difference. But when it comes to something like brand and something like that, there's no point in waging this war when it's not making a huge difference, if that makes sense. Whereas there's no difference, rock salt's not more damaging to your system than regular salt, if that makes sense.
I'd be completely in agreement there. If you're making up a little salt and carbohydrate solution for half time or whatever, and you pull out the pink salt, and they're like, "Oh, what's this stuff? This is going to take you from good to great."
It's like in Space Jam, when Bugs Bunny just gets the water and puts Michael's secret stuff on it. That's essentially what it is. Shout out to Space Jam. Yeah.
You're giving away my halftime tricks.
Yeah. If anyone from Space Jam 2 is watching and needs a recovery team for halftime, we can guarantee you'll beat the Monsters.
Next one then, doing a 30 days of abs or a 30-day ab challenge will give you abs. So like the big thing here is that you like pretty certain, unless you've like some weird deformity, you already have abs. You just can't see them because there's a layer of fat over them. If you are just to focus on doing 30 days of abs, while you're going to fatigue them, they may get some bit stronger. And just doing the world of crunches probably isn't going to make them that much stronger anyway, or like give it that much like relevance to stuff you do for anything in life. But unless you're doing something to address reducing the amount of fat you have on your stomach, such as the calorie deficit, doing all around the overall training, managing your nutrition and other types of training as well, it's not just going to directly give you abs. They may feel a bit sore, or they may feel like they're working a bit more. That's just increasing the blood flow to them specifically. Targeted core work as well, to like if you want to improve the strength and function of your overall core, is going to tie in so much more than just the traditional 6 muscles you see on the front. It's going to tie in like your obliques, your trans abs, which are there underneath. You can't see them, but provide an awful lot of stability. But you also have the whole kind of musculature there as well, or surrounding your glutes, surrounding the front of your hips, down your groins, up further up even into your chest and your serrates, all play a part in the function of the core and making that more, I suppose, functional without using that word too often.
Yeah, another poorly used word. Yeah, no, I agree with everything. That's A1.
Next one then, this is interesting. I didn't think people had asked about this, but lactic acid causes fatigue and cramp. So I think this is really interesting because like we looked at this a bit back when we were doing a master's, particularly the physiology section. So lactic acid is attributed to a lot. So say like, oh, I'm feeling really stiff today. That's the lactic acid in my muscle. And you're like, no, it's not. Or like I remember actually a religion teacher in school saying to us, don't eat ice cream or drink any milk the day before the match because it'll stop the lactic acid building up in your system the next day. And I thought, oh yeah, fair enough. And I didn't do it for years, like, but
it's still probably not great to eat ice cream the day before a game.
No, but not drinking milk isn't like that's not something you should be recommending either. Oh, that's lactose intolerant. But basically, lactic acid is if you're to run 400 meters or 800 meters as fast as you can, and while you're running, you got that burning sensation in your leg, most people would have attributed that to lactic acid, because when they started doing the early research on that, and they would have tested the blood for a few different chemicals in there to see what rises at that stage, lactic acid was one of the first that was found. So for years, when you do those hard intervals, it's lactic acid that's causing it. As we got a bit more nuanced in what we're able to test for, we found that lactic acid actually came on, or levels of lactic acid rose at the same time as other stuff. Predominantly changes in the muscle's pH level, basically muscle acidity, driven largely by hydrogen ions and pyruvate. The lactic acid came on just after those to try and clear all those away, to get rid of it so you can keep running. Now, this is part of getting into the anaerobic energy system, the glycolytic system mainly, which like you can do reasonably intense exercise for 2 to 3 minutes. Thereafter, your body just isn't able to supply the fuel any longer. As lactic acid tries to clear away those hydrogen ions and all like that to stop the burning sensation so you can, but ultimately it's not able to do its job that quickly if you continue to exercise at that pace. So lactic acid doesn't cause the fatigue. It's the hydrogen ions and muscle pH it does. It does try and clear it away to reduce that level of fatigue, but it certainly doesn't cause the cramp. The cramp is largely from underconditioned muscles and possibly a lack of electrolytes in the system.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's our
Just briefly then, because this isn't really a myth, this is more of a question, but I said, if they bother to write into the question box and discuss it anyway. Was addressed as well in the episode with Stephen Casey there about 2 weeks ago as well. But how important is stretching and flexibility in the gym?
Not very.
I mean, if you're a gymnast, very important.
Yeah. I'm presuming this is from somebody potentially field sport based. So I'd say not very important, but it depends on you and it. Like, what's the goal? Is the goal just flexibility in general? That can be achieved through lifting weights too. It can be achieved through a whole pile of ways. That I suppose often the perception is that stretching makes you more flexible. and that's perceived to be the way to injury reduction or avoidance, I'm guessing. I don't know, what are your thoughts on that, Murph or Shane?
I was going to say I suppose not stretching specifically, but building a good quality warm up is very important. And if that is to include stretching, then that's great. But it just should make sure that you're putting the body in the best position before you go out to perform. Like, you shouldn't just go, I suppose, try and clean 100 straight from the ground straight away without warming up, without doing anything. So it's not, I wouldn't say stretching and flexibility in itself is important, but having a clear warm up plan is. That makes sense. So whether that incorporates some flexibility and stretching work, great. But more importantly, you just want to be making sure that you're getting the body in a position to perform. So you're not just going from 0 to 100 all at once.
I think the key is that you need to be flexible enough for the demands of your sport, and also to a few like health related outcomes. Like, if I do not have the flexibility in my hips and lower back to bend over and tie my laces, that's probably not good. I need to work on that. Same as like, if I am doing something on the field, I don't have no, like, realistically, we should all be able to do some form of overhead squat without too much difficulty. That, like, stopping you from able to do that would generally come from tight ankles, tight hips, and tight thoracic. Because our lifestyles are so based around sitting us here now at laptops or at desks or driving, negates against those areas we should be reasonably mobile in. It's worth building in something, particularly like a Shane said there, to warmth and stuff. But I think that comes from the myth that doing loads of flexibility, mobility work, yoga stuff is going to make me more flexible and therefore reduce my chance of getting injured. It's not as straightforward as that. Like, there was even, I don't know, was it last year, the year before, a couple of papers coming out to say that flexibility should be removed as a health-related component of fitness now as well, because it has no real carryover to any other marker of health. The only way it can be kind of linked to others is that if you look at someone's level of strength, like, flexibility will often be tied to that. And that if you have really weak hamstrings, they're going to tighten up. If you have a really weak chest and you do more on it, it's going to tighten up. Or if you have a really strong chest but a weak back, your shoulders are going to round in and you lose mobility across your chest and your back there. And that you need balance of strength, but also strength through a full range of motion for mobility and or flexibility to be there. But to say, and I think it's something like I've seen an awful lot lately, is like GA teams, we need to get in a yoga instructor now to do a session a week with us. The actual benefits of that, I think, are so limited. You will get some from Pilates, to be fair, because there is a lot of strengthening component built in with the mobility. But realistically, like, it can't happen.
If you're going to spend that time, doing yoga, you'd be better off out in the field doing your skills. You know, kicking a ball, pucking a ball, getting the ball in your hand, whatever sport it is that you do compete in, you'd be better off working on the skills component of that. Than you get a lot more bang for your buck there than you would, like that teams getting in, yoga once a week.
I think you need to address like the underlying cause of why are you so tight and so stiff? Are you just drastically overtraining? Are you doing a gym program that's completely unsuitable and focused on 2 or 3 muscles and massively neglecting all the others? But yoga isn't going to cure that completely. It might make you feel better for a couple of days afterwards. But like, there is no team incorporating yoga in the middle championship. Like, if you have a block of game on game, week after week, you're not coming in there every Thursday night doing an hour of yoga, because there's so many far more important things to do. So the stuff you've done back in January and February, that's gone. That's having no impact on you.
Yeah. All right.
Next one there, I think Shane has to take this because he has made the most gains and done the least cardio. Does cardio kill gains?
Yes. Next question. No, no, I'm only messing. No, it doesn't. But again, it's going to affect your overall energy balance equation. So if you take, for example, if you're eating 3,000 calories a day, and with your resistance training workout, that brings you to 2,500 calories expended. If you want to go for a run on top of that because you're worried about your fitness levels, that's going to bring your overall energy expenditure up as well. So if that brings it closer to level, that's going to affect your ability to gain weight. So it's all going to come down to calories in versus calories out again. So if you do want to still incorporate cardio and you are trying to gain muscle, you have to make sure that you're eating enough to account for not just your extra resistance training, not just your surplus, but also that cardio that you're going to be doing. So it is possible to do cardio and still keep building muscle. You just do make it harder for yourself. You always have to account it in.
You
But
also have to be
it-
conscious of
yeah.
fatigue management there in terms of the type of cardio you're doing. Like if you're doing a heavy lower body day and then you go down to the track and run intervals, like the recovery there is going to be so hard. Or like if you're if you do an upper body, say, oh, I'll do some lower body cardio here now, and you do like a spin class or do 6 sets of 4 minutes on the watt bike, and you plan on going in and squatting the next day, the quality of your squats is going to be massively impacted there. Just the fatigue in your legs in general. Whereas, like looking at, because I know there was a mad idea of like bodybuilders using HIIT to further cardio to like obviously in the few minutes they burn more calories, but overall they burned less because they were so fatigued the rest of the time and the quality of their gym sessions went way down. Whereas if as your cardio you're going for brisk walks, doing some incline treadmill walking, doing some even cross trainer stuff or light cardiac output style stuff, that's like obviously great for health. I think it's something that some bodybuilders and definitely powerlifters neglect in terms of overall health. But it said cardio will specifically kill your gains. I think it is a definite no. You just need to be careful of the type of cardio you choose.
Well, and also in addition to just and it is a balancing act, but like by including cardio, like because you do have the other side of it where there's zero cardio. By including cardio in your training, you're going to be fitter, and more able and ready to perform the lifts you're looking to do. That could be, say, if you're going through hypertrophy. Actually, it doesn't matter if you're going through a hypertrophy phase or a strength phase or power phase, whatever it is you're going through. That if you're generally fitter, if you've a better cardio base and you've a degree of it continuing on, you're going to be able to recover much better or much quicker, much more efficiently between sets and be able to perform that a little bit better. So it is important to keep it in there. It's not it shouldn't be necessarily these months I do cardio, these months I do strength. You're trying to get a balancing act between the lot so that they all complement each other. The same ways like we lift weights for field sports or even if it was like triathlons, where you lift weights so that you can perform better in your sport. Your cardio is a big part of that too. So it's about marrying them up. Well, really.
Yeah, you shouldn't be trying to focus on both at the same time. So you shouldn't be trying to say increase your 400 meters time at the same time that you're looking to put on muscle mass. You should have different times when you're focused on each. Whereas even if you're trying to increase your 400 meter time, you're not going to completely stop resistance training, and nobody would ever recommend you. But when it's flipped the other way, people do recommend you completely get rid of cardio when that's not the case at all. You shouldn't.
Next, do women get bulky from lifting weights? And I'd just like to say quickly, no, you get bulky from eating too much cake.
Just cake. Yeah, it comes back to what we said earlier on at the start. You will gain weight by consuming more calories than your body needs. That's how you gain weight. So for women, men, whatever it might be, you're going to gain weight if you're in a calorie surplus. Just lifting weights is not going to make you bulky. What lifting weights will do is it will make you strong. It will increase your output. It will increase or it'll help you to increase strength and create and build some muscle. I think that's often where the fear comes from, is that you'll do a squat and all of a sudden you're Arnold Schwarzenegger. If it was that easy, we'd all be huge. It's just one of those fears, I think, that's out there, in that, like, if I go to the gym, if I lift weights, that I'll get huge. And it is seen in it is women more so than men that have that kind of hang up. But it's your calorie intake, as Murph said. If you're eating too much cake, you will gain weight.
Well, like the difficulty a lot of females have, and even getting stronger and putting on muscle in general, is actually really hard because they don't have that underlying testosterone boost that men have. But like, to get to the level where you would put on a noticeable amount of muscle mass is so far away, and takes like reasonably decent planning, discipline, all like that. So to say like you're going to get too bulky, no. If you eat too much, then you probably will.
It's probably going to be the opposite. Whereas if you are completely new to resistance training, putting on that little bit of extra muscle will make a huge effect to your overall calorie burn. By just putting on that extra bit of muscle, it'll burn so much more calories on a daily basis. So you're more than likely going to end up losing weight, especially in the first month to 2 months of you starting a resistance training program. So in many cases, it's the opposite to getting bulky. It's you will lean out much more.
Last two then. So, are forms of starvation required to lose weight in January or any time of year? But often it's looked at as January because we've overeaten over Christmas. But do you need to starve yourself then to lose that weight?
Straight up, no. And it's actually, and I'm glad you mentioned January there, as obviously we're recording this in January, but everything we're saying applies across the year. But this month is particularly susceptible to, I suppose, diet regimes that are quite restrictive in nature, and like veganery is a big thing that people are jumping into without much thought. They're just jumping into a complete overhaul of their diet overnight. Calories drop through the floor, and people do end up just basically not having great quality sleep, depending on things like caffeine to boost their energy. And you can only do this for, maybe a week or two before you really kind of bottom out. And it's so important to, I suppose, I know we're talking about starvation mode here, but the reason I mentioned that just this month, these restrictive diets that end up being like colossally low in calories, just to try and avoid those, try and avoid anything that's going to be a massive overhaul. If you do want to, say, go from eating your standard diet to eating vegan, then put a bit of thought into it, plan it out, speak to a nutritionist or a dietitian, get some real information, then edge your way into it. Jumping off the cliff into these into big dietary changes, especially if you're unsure of what you're getting into, can leave you quite low in calories, which can leave you low in nutrients, low in vitamins, low in protein, and low in energy overall as well.
Last one then, and my favourite, fit teas.
I don't care for fit teas personally, but yeah. So most of the time, to be honest, this isn't even like fat burners and BCAAs. I've yet to see a fit tea with any sort of scientific backing or legitimate ingredient in it. It's literally just a heap of cheap stuff that they could throw together and are marketing as fit tea. There's absolutely no conceivable reason to take a fit tea. Don't take fit tea.
The diuretic side of it is it's water weight. It's water loss. It's a change in your water status, which will come right back. And it's an expensive one at that. Yeah, just simply don't. Often, even with these companies, when they're quizzed on, hey, you've made a claim on this, on your product. Can you explain to me which one of these ingredients? What do they do? You'll be waiting. There'll be nothing but tumbleweeds passing by when you ask these questions. So either that, or you'll get a hyperbolic kind of answer that doesn't really answer anything. But yeah, they're nonsense.
There's the placebo effect there, that if you are drinking this tea, if you know I'm drinking the tea, I need to do everything else now as well. So you get your good night's sleep, you go and be active most days, you eat well throughout the rest of your meals. That's what's making the impact. It is not the fit tea that you've paid some influencer a heap of money for.
That's presuming, Murph, that you understand that you're like, oh well, I'm doing this, so I'll do everything better. A lot of clients I've come across will get the fit tea and do nothing else. They won't change a single thing because they're like, oh sure, I'm drinking my fit tea.
Use it as a mixer with their vodka.
Yeah, so that's everything for today. Thanks a million to everyone who sent in requests and stuff there that you want us to look at, or some of the myths there. It's something we'll probably do again in a couple of months' time, because there are so many of them out there. And if there's any stuff you'd like us to discuss there, or if you have specific questions you'd like us to address, there are things we might start adding in or basing the full topic around afterward that way.
Or feedback.
We also have some fairly exciting guests lined up over the next couple of weeks and months in general that we're eager to get on board. We will try put them out in beforehand. So if you've any specific questions for any of those, you can definitely ask. Or if there's any guests you would like us to get on, then please just let us know. Give feedback through, wherever you follow us.